This week, what you can do to deal with the impact of this rough winter season. Here's Laura Hutchinson.
Good Sunday afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Laura Hutchinson. This winter certainly packed a punch, not just here in the Northeast, but nationwide. Places in the Deep South have seen record cold and snow. And while we have plenty of practice with severe weather here in western Massachusetts, storms still leave many struggling with keeping warm and their property protected. So that's where 22 News in Focus comes in today. Today we're going to talk to experts about home insurance. We'll talk about fuel assistance, safe ways to remove snow and ice from your property, and we'll also have some tips from a travel agent for those of you who are considering a trip someplace warmer. So we all have a lot to get to today, but before we do that, let's talk about how long these cold, snowy days will last. We have 22 News Storm Team meteorologist Adam Strumko joining us here today to talk to us about this. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Laura, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
So talk to me about how this winter has compared to last winter. Sounds like every year we have something that takes the headlines. Really, last year we had that huge storm that was 3 feet of snow. Here we go again, another different type of winter.
This is more of a typical winter that we see in New England. Last winter we really didn't have much until that big February 8th snowstorm, and that was somewhat late in the season. This winter we've been seeing regular storms. Started in December, we've had them through January, and now they're really starting to ramp up in February. We didn't see a lot of big storms early on. They were typical, couple inches, maybe 6 inches here and there. But now we're starting to see these bigger snowstorms that typically we do see here in New England. If you think about the blizzard of 1978, we just had the anniversary, this 36th anniversary of that storm, which was February 5th through the 7th. So we tend to see some of these big snowstorms this time of year. And of course, we had one big one last week and one that just this past week as well.
So this is usually the time of year that we start counting down the days to spring. How is it average for us to continue to see storms even into March? Is that something that should be expected, or?
Yeah, we do. We've seen some big storms in March. In 1993, we had a big snowstorm that affected the entire eastern seaboard. So we're not out of the woods, even though it's getting later. The good news is that when we do get these storms, a lot of the snow tends to melt pretty quickly. The sun is stronger, so it melts the storms, and we start to see warmer days where a lot of this, once we get it, it may be quite a bit, but it will disappear fairly quickly. If we get snow in January and December, when we start to see the coldest time of the year, it lingers and it adds up and adds up and adds up. And a couple of years ago, we were getting hit over and over by these snowstorms. Well, the snow wasn't going away. It was staying and it was adding up, adding up, adding up. So we had a huge snowpack, and we had all sorts of problems with roofs collapsing and things like that. So this time of year, even though we're getting quite a bit of snow, we've seen almost a foot of snow this past storm, and 2 weeks ago we had about a foot of snow as well. So at least now we get that snow and it will disappear fairly quickly. And it'll take a time, when we have significant amounts, but it will in time go away pretty quickly.
And talk to me about some of the changes that we've seen nationwide. What's been pretty interesting is how the South is actually getting hit with weather that they're not used to seeing. It kind of makes us all wonder what's going on with some of the weather patterns. We've seen some crazy things happen in western Massachusetts in the last few years. Tornadoes, microbursts, these huge storms. It's just interesting. Is there something changing in the atmosphere?
Well, it's hard to know for sure. I mean, we have to study these patterns over a long period of time, but what we're seeing, like you said, is pretty unprecedented for what we're seeing down in the South. Now, the reason why is the jet stream, it's well to the south. I mean, farther south than we generally see it, and that's allowing some very cold air to move down into those regions. Well, they typically see rain and storm systems move through, but the problem is when you put cold air there and these storm systems come in off the Gulf, you have a lot of moisture with the Gulf of Mexico, but when you have this cold air mass that's over those regions, when you put that moisture into that air mass, you get the snow, you get the sleet, you get the freezing rain, and you get the icing problems that they've had. We saw what happened in Georgia a couple weeks ago with just a little bit of snow caused the entire state just about to shut down because they're so not accustomed to that kind of weather. It's really debilitating.
Right. That was interesting to see. We were like, how much snow was it? And it was somewhere around 2 inches.
Yeah, that would be nothing for us here. Of course, we're better capable to handle something like that. And we expect something like that to happen quite often during the winter. They don't expect or even to see that in an entire winter season. So to have something like that, we can see the impact of those areas that don't normally see that kind of weather. And what it does to those areas.
Now, I remember in September or October, we started to get our Farmer's Almanac predictions of what the winter was going to look like. And I remember we were saying that it was going to be a fairly rough winter compared to other seasons like this. And it seems like that's pretty much what it's been. We've had many storms after another. That would be how I would classify that. But I'm just wondering, how do local meteorologists predict the weather versus the Farmer's Almanac?
Yeah, most meteorologists don't put much into the Farmer's Almanac. I mean, they base a lot of their information by climatology and past weather events and that kind of thing. You know, we have all these sophisticated computer models that are generated by the National Weather Service and all these other computer information that comes into us that we study, and we can see these patterns developing and how they might change over time. So, you know, they put out this prediction. Sometimes it's right, and they may, you know, nail it this year, although, you know, certain dates they might get right and other dates they might not get right for these storms that we get. I mean, typically, you know, we do get snow in February. We'll get these storms, and if it's one of those years that we get these bigger storms, then they luck out and it's correct. But we really don't look to the Farmer's Almanac for anything else than astronomical data and stuff like that to find out when the full moon is and stuff like that. But, you know, some people do put more into it and depend more on that type of thing. Sometimes it's right, but, you know, you got to take it with a grain of salt.
Okay, and any kind of prediction as to when the spring is going to come?
Hopefully soon. I think, well, for some people, they're hoping for you know, an early spring, and of course, others, you know, like to ski, and this is a great winter. You know, a couple winters ago, it was a terrible winter. The ski area suffered. This winter, they're making out great because of so much snowfall, and it looks like they'll be able to snow right into the spring. But it does look like some warmer temperatures are going to be on the way over the next couple of weeks, so that's a good sign. We are in this stormy pattern right now, and that we've seen that has set up. You know, we're lucky in January where a lot of the storms were staying just to our south, the bigger storms. But now that the jet stream has moved a little bit farther north, especially up the eastern seaboard, that's allowing these nor'easters that typically bring us quite a bit of snow to affect our weather. So we got to keep an eye on that. But as time goes on, and depending on the track, and as we start to see the warmer temperatures moving north, then we're going to be looking at more of rain probably than snow. Depending, of course, on the track, we can still get you know, a pretty good snowstorm even in February and March. But as we progress through February and March, eventually, you know, like we were saying, the sun angle is getting stronger. So even if we do get something, it's not going to last long or stick around as long. But at least, you know, there are some signs that spring isn't too far off. I mean, it's next month that we'll finally officially get into spring. Meteorologically, we consider the first day of March as the meteorological start of spring, because we're already starting to see the patterns change. The days are getting longer, and all that's already starting to take place. So from a meteorological standpoint, if you're looking for spring, then you can perhaps consider March 1st as the start of spring. Doesn't mean it's going to be like the switch is going to flip on and it's going to be sunny and warm. We can still get big snowstorms right through March. We've had April 1997, the April Fool's snowstorm, which caused a lot of problems. So, you know, here in New England, just because the season changes doesn't mean the weather necessarily does, but I think a lot of people are hopeful it will.
And do you have any concerns about the snow we have on the ground this weekend and flooding? You were saying, you know, we do get those warmer temperatures, so when we have a few feet of snow built up and there are snow banks everywhere right now, snow piles in all these parking lots, any concerns about the flooding?
Yes, I mean, especially as we head into March and April. Those are the typical months that we see, especially river flooding. So as we head over the next couple of weeks, now that we have this snowpack, and some spots have, it looks like close to a foot, almost 2 feet of snow on the ground, if we were to get some heavy rain on top of that and mild temperatures, where we did see some temperatures back even in December and January where we're jumping around, where it would be really cold and the temperatures would jump up into the 50s, near 60 degrees. If we see some jumps like that, that's when we're going to have problems, because you have the heavy rain that will fall into the snow absorbs it, and plus if we have the melting taking place, then everything kind of happens all at once. If it's a more gradual melt, or we get, you know, maybe a light rain or temperatures slowly warm up, then it's a more gradual melting, and we don't really see that problem with flooding. But if, you know, and typically we do see days where we'll get some heavy rain and milder temperatures. So if we do have a lot of snow on the ground, when that occurs, then we could be talking about, well, street flooding is a typical thing, but more of a concern will be the river flooding. What is pretty remarkable is last year, I remember talking to Brian Lapis about this, I want to say was the first year that we didn't have any problems with river flooding along the Connecticut River in Massachusetts. Almost always in March and April, because of the snow melt, because of the snow up north that melts and adds water to the river, we see the rivers rise. Even though it could be a beautiful day, because of everything melting up north, because of some rain that also flows into the river, we typically see it rise. It's something that pretty much happens every year. Last year we did not see that. We did not have any flood warnings along the Connecticut River.
Interesting.
So we'll have to see what happens. I would expect it, you know, with the snow that we have now, and there was plenty of snow up north as well, we'll probably see those rivers rising as we head into April. But that's still a ways off, so we really don't have to concern ourselves, at least right now, with that.
Exactly. And that's something we'll let people know about on the newscast, of course.
Exactly. Anything like that, any flooding issues, of course, we'll keep you informed on
Thank you so much. 22 News Storm Team Meteorologist Adam Stremko, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us.
My pleasure.
You're just a wealth of knowledge on this, so I appreciate you coming on. After the break, we'll have information about what you can do to protect your property from snowstorm damage. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We're talking about what you can do to protect yourself from the conditions we've seen so far this winter. We just spoke with Adam Stremko about the weather patterns that have dominated this winter. Recent snowstorms have left heavy, wet snow on buildings, creating ice dams, giant icicles. Here to talk about the proper removal of this type of snow, we have Fran Bollier of Phil Bollier and Sons Home Improvement. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
I appreciate
Laura.
it.
Thanks for having me.
So it's a busy time of year for snow, roofs, a lot of wear and tear the winter can do on your home. So I just kind of want to know, first off, what are some of the more common calls that you're getting this time of year?
This time of year is, especially the last week or two, a lot of ice dam issues. That's generally the largest concern. Some people are concerned about getting, you know, what's going to happen especially with the recent snow this week. Snow roof collapses, things like that. Those are general questions. It's not a huge concern at this point, generally. Unless you live in a really old home, then you might want to give us a call and have us take a look at it.
So what exactly is an ice dam, and who is a candidate to get one?
If you live in a Cape-style home, you are generally going to be more susceptible than any other type of home. Where an ice dam starts when the exterior temperature, number one, is below freezing. People think it happens when it's warm out. That's not what happens. The heat that you pay for rises up through your home. There's nothing you're going to do to stop heat from rising. It's going to go up through your insulation and eventually make way into your attic. If you don't have proper ventilation and can't vent that heat out quick enough, it's going to melt that snowpack that's on your roof. Snowpack, melted snow turns to water. It's going to drip down towards your gutter lines. As soon as it hits your gutter lines, this is where below freezing is important. It will freeze. It's no longer receiving that warm air from your home. You ever drive on the highway and see the sign that says bridge freezes before the road? That's what happens, that cold air underneath. So that's what's happening at your eaves. It will freeze, begin to build up a big block of ice. At some point, it's right at that thaw freeze line. It's going to start to build up water behind that ice dam where you don't even see it. That water is going to work its way to a higher level, get under your shingles, and, you know, potentially leak into your home, leak into your, you know, a couple winters ago was awful for it. We've seen a little bit here the last couple weeks. Warmer temperatures are going to alleviate all that. But that's the basis of an ice dam. You can go on the internet and really educate yourself. You can also give us a call. I'd be more than happy to come and explain it to you.
And do you actually go out and see if ice dams are forming? People who may feel like it might be happening, but they're not sure?
Well, absolutely. We've had some calls recently where people actually were having water coming in their home. There's a couple ways to solve it. The quickest way is not to remove the ice dam. It's to expose the ice dam to the exterior. So what that means is shovel the snow off your roof. The more snow you can remove off the backside of the ice dam will freeze. Or it'll thaw and the water will find its way out. But leaving that snowpack, and we call it a blanket on your house, is the worst thing you can do. Get the snow off, it'll cool your attic, You'll stop the ice, the snow from melting. You can solve an ice dam that way. That's the temporary fix.
So then that brings us to our next question, the proper way to remove snow from your roof, if that's something that you're going to be doing on your own. What is the best, safest way to get snow off your roof?
It could be tricky, Laura. You know, if you're really handy and you're risky, you can jump up on your roof if you think you can walk it, and you can shovel it pretty good. And throw it to the ground, which can be dangerous when you throw it to the ground. Make sure you're not going to damage anything on the ground. It is tricky. Snow rakes is a great way. It's hard work, but it is a great way to remove the snow. I would say snow rake or hire a contractor. Somebody will take responsibility for you.
Okay, and what are some mistakes that you see people making this time of year? People who are maybe trying to do some of these activities on their own, climbing up there. Do you find people trying to hack away at an ice dam? What are some of the mistakes you see?
That's a great question, because we go back a lot of times in the springtime and we see the gutters look like they were peppered by a woodpecker. People had hammers up there, they had rock salt, they all kinds of things. That is the biggest mistake, is trying to clear your gutters. The gutter's not the problem. The problem is get the snow off the house. Get the snow off the house, the attic will cool, all ice dams will stop at that point. And then you wait for a warmer day or in the spring, and then we can come back and evaluate why it happened, what to do, and what the causes are, and how to stop it.
That sounds much easier, actually,
Much easier.
too. Less work than going up there and hacking away at it.
No doubt. We learned a lot in 2010 and 11 about ice dams. I think a lot of people who owned homes I was talking to some people who had owned homes for 35 years, never had ice dams, and now they had ice dams.
Right.
That was a pretty bad winter. We saw a little bit of it this winter, too.
Yeah. Now, does age of your home have anything to do with that sort of thing? Or is it like, you know, if you're not a candidate one winter, is it as time goes on, you're more likely, or how does that work?
Generally, an older home is going to be less insulated, which is going to be a huge cause for superheating that attic. It's going to be less ventilated. If you drive through a new neighborhood today, our local communities have been expanding, towns like Belchertown, Ludlow, Southwick, in Westfield, many new homes. You drive down a new neighborhood, you don't see a stitch of ice on the roof. The houses are properly insulated and they're properly ventilated. You can do that to old homes. It can be a little costly, but it can be done.
Okay. And how about around the perimeter of your home, when we start talking about basement damage and you start having a pile up of snow, what are some things that people should keep in mind as far as snow packed around their house, vents that they should be clearing out, things like that?
The first thing is, if you have a furnace that vents out the sidewall, make sure that that exhaust is clear of any snow. We've heard of some deaths in Massachusetts, snow being piled up against the house. The second thing is obviously any points of drainage coming out of your downspouts. Where's that water going to go when it gets out of the downspout? Make sure that's clear. That way you don't get water back in your basements. Most calls we get for water in the basement are what we call surface water. It's water just generally that hits your home through rain or snow, falls to the ground, is not dispersed properly. Not a lot of water comes up out of the ground, although that is common, but generally it comes off of the home, so it's controllable.
Okay, and you were saying now might be a good time of year to start planning out some of your spring projects also, as we do look ahead.
I kind of jokingly said that to you, but that's true. We're definitely don't have as much going on this time of year, most contractors. So if you are planning an exterior remodel, a roofing, siding, you wait till, or a kitchen or a bath, if you wait till March or April, sometimes it can be a little bit more difficult to get a contractor's attention.
Yeah.
This time of year is a perfect time to call. I'll give you all the time in the world.
It's interesting, yeah, because people aren't always thinking about that this time of year. I have a hard enough time getting my car through the car wash,
sure,
but thinking about making all these grand changes. Hey, thank you so much, Fran Bollier. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Some great advice. Thank you so much. And do you have enough insurance if your property gets damaged during a snowstorm? We're going to talk about insurance after this. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Good Sunday, you're watching 22 News in Focus. We've been discussing this winter's weather and how to protect your property from damage. But if you have damage to your home or business, what can you do to recoup your losses? Joining me to discuss insurance needs, we have Bill Trudeau, President and CEO of the Insurance Center of New England. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here, Laura.
So what kind of claims are you already seeing from people? I know a couple years ago we had a very busy winter with roof collapses. How has this year compared, and what are you seeing?
This year so far, I would say not as many claims. So I think that although we've had quite a bit of snow in the past couple weeks here, there's been enough of a pause between some of the storms. There's been some melt, and there's not a massive blanket of snow on people's roofs. So right now, at this current state, we don't seem to have enough snow that it's causing weight issues on some of the large flat commercial roofs. And it seems like we may be able to get, I guess depends on Mother Nature, but we may be able to get to springtime without seeing the major damage from weight of ice and snow.
Well, it's good to hear that it's been a little quieter than normal. We were just hearing about, some damage that can be done to your roof if you're doing some of your own cleaning and that sort of thing. I'm just wondering, when you do have some of this damage done, whether it's to your basement or to your roof, if you're hacking away, he was talking about people hacking away the ice dams, what kind of protections do you have when you start to see the wear and tear on your house? Maybe that are man-made, sometimes maybe just by nature.
Well, things like when you have wear and tear, you have an older roof that's just sort of worn out, or the shingles are curling and things of that nature, cracking, and which may make it more susceptible to leakage. What's interesting, the leak itself is covered. So even if it's through an older roof, the leak that comes into the home that does damage to drywall and other things, the resulting damage from the leak is going to be covered, but the insurance company is not going to include the cost of replacing your worn-out roof in that claim. What would be different is if we have events like we had in 2011, such as whether it's the microburst or trees falling or wind damage, and if the roof itself becomes damaged,
right,
and then the roof has suffered injury from an event like wind or tornado or something, then the roof is going to be part of the claim and is going to be covered. But replacing a roof is not part of a claim when you have a leak in the roof generally.
Okay. And speaking of the actual roof becoming damaged, one thing that we get into the newsroom a lot is whether it's this time of year with ice on trees and snow on trees, or as you were just saying, microburst and that kind of thing with trees. When is it your responsibility? When a tree is questionable, I guess on a line of a property, your neighbors, you're not quite sure. How does that work?
Well, we get this question a lot, and it becomes confusing, especially if the tree that hit someone's home was not on their own land. And so because it's from another property, it seems confusing. But really, the homeowner's policy covers falling objects, and that is just going to be covered, whether that tree came from your property or whether it fell from the neighbor's property. And so you don't have to worry about where the tree came from. When it comes to responsibility, that shifts over to issues of legal responsibility and trying to, let's say, sue somebody to recover things that weren't covered by the insurance. That's a more complicated situation. And from what I've seen in the courts and talking to some people who've had this happen, it's difficult to prove that somebody was negligent about a tree and that their negligence led to that damage to your home. Because most of the time, trees are brought down by things from nature, high winds, weight of snow and ice, and that's considered really nature and not the fault of the person who owned the land the tree was on. So that's tricky, but the good part is that whether the tree was on your land or it's on your neighbor's land, if it hits your house and you have a valid insurance policy, a traditional homeowner's policy, you should be in good shape with coverage.
Trees can be so beautiful. Sometimes they can cause so much trouble. You're saying when you go through the court system and all that. Okay, so and we were also we discussed the roofs. What about the basement damage? I know a lot of people have a lot of snow packed up. Some people dealing with leakage and all that. What is typically covered in the homeowner's insurance?
Well, the homeowner's policy, the way it's written, it covers water damage that comes from things like roof leaks, or if part of the home is destroyed or open, and so let's say a window is broken by a tree, or the roof is. The water that comes in through those areas would be covered. But when we have water that seeps in, it's surface water, or rain that starts to get into the basement, the overflow of streams and other bodies of water, and then surface water runoff like rain, those things are not covered by a homeowner's policy. And although there's elements of it that could be covered by a flood policy, damage to the basement area by a typical flood policy is really restricted, and it may be limited to things like the mechanical aspects of a home, like the furnace and the electrical. So the National Flood Insurance Program, which is behind most of the flood policies, it has very careful restrictive language for coverage in basements. So what that really means is that people who have, if you've made a big investment in a finished basement, if you suffer water damage and it's from surface water or a stream that's overflowing, that's going to be difficult to get coverage for.
Now, how do these coverages compare to that like, say, a business might have?
They're very similar. So when we look at the coverage that's on a dwelling, the building itself, it's very similar to the same kind of coverage that a business purchases. In insurance terms, we might call it special or all-risk coverage. When you get into talking to your insurance agent, that's very often the coverage that's on a commercial policy. There's a few other things that commercial policies might cover, but for the most part, they're very similar.
Okay, and is there anything that people in Western Massachusetts should consider? I guess, when do you know that what you have is the proper insurance to have? How often should you have that conversation? Is there anything that you feel people in Western Massachusetts should be looking at that maybe they don't have? Talk to me about that.
Well, in Western Mass, we have some areas where people are, if they're prone to flood damage, the federal laws require, if you're getting a loan through a bank that's governed by the federal government or regulated by the FDIC, they often will insist that you carry flood insurance. So people that are in flood zones, they need to be very familiar with the flood zone that they're in and should be cautious. So people that are close to the Connecticut River, people that are close to other rivers, they're often very aware of it. And with the regulations we're seeing around flood insurance and the increase in premiums that's being debated in Congress right now, more people are focused on flood insurance and on some of the particulars of it relative to the rate and the amount of coverage, et cetera, because it's becoming more expensive. As far as when you should look at your homeowner's insurance and evaluate it, I think a good rule of thumb is if you haven't done it in a few years, it makes sense to call your agent and maybe review the amount of coverage you have, take a look and see what you have for a deductible. Take a look at other structures. There's a section called Other Structures. If you have an enormous outdoor 6-car garage and look at the limit that's provided automatically in the policy, the amount that's given automatically may not be enough if you have a very large other structure that's not connected to your home. The other thing is if you make any big changes to the home, like upgrades, new roof, new heating system, new electrical system, those are good times to check in with your agent and make sure that your record shows that you have those upgrades. And if you make an addition or other big changes to the house, you may want to reevaluate the limit that you're carrying for the coverage that you're purchasing in case something goes wrong where you need to potentially replace the whole dwelling. You want to make sure you have enough insurance.
Okay, and do you recommend people have any kind of special wind damage included on their insurance? You know, we are getting into the spring. Everybody remembers June 1st, so it's of course a question to ask.
That is a good question. The nice answer that we get to give in Western Mass tends to be that wind and wind exposure is generally covered in all the policies that we purchase. It's rare that I see a policy that has any limitation on wind in Hamden, Hampshire, Franklin, these counties. If we have people who own a home on the shore, a Connecticut shore or Cape Cod, they may see a deductible that might be 5% of the value of the dwelling or 4% of the value of the dwelling for wind and hail. You see that. So they have, if it's a $400,000 house and you have a 5% deductible, you're going to have a $20,000 deductible if you have a wind or hail event. So that's significant. In this area, it's not really as much of a concern, so it's covered.
Bill Trudeau, Insurance Center of New England, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us about it. I appreciate it. And if you're running low on funds for heating your home this winter, we do have some advice for you. After the break, stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about weathering the storm, winter storms in particular. We've discussed this winter's weather patterns and how to protect and ensure your property from snow damage. The recent cold temperatures and days off from school and work because of storms has us cranking up the heat. But for some in our community, keeping their homes warm is certainly a struggle. And here to talk about what you can do if you need some assistance, we have Gail Pizzichini, Energy Director for the Valley Opportunity Council, here to talk to us. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Laura.
Boy, to say it's been cold, I think might be an understatement. That's kind of how I think of this winter. Honestly, the snow has been one thing, but the temperatures, really, you must be seeing a lot of people coming through your doors.
Oh
right
my
now.
gosh, we really are, and it was just horrendous for all of those people who are heating with oil and kerosene and propane because the cost of fuel is just so high, and they are really going through their energy benefits just so quickly. And here we are in February, and we just got an increase from the federal government, and we were feeling oh so wonderful because we were able to give people a bit more fuel for their heating, only to realize that even though we got an increase, it wasn't enough to get everybody 100 gallons of oil. 100 gallons of oil today runs about $400, and that's a lot of money.
It's a lot
so
of money
it's really difficult. And then we heard that the state was going to be giving us $20 million across the state for increased benefits, only to find out, weren't we happy, only to find out that in fact they were only going to give us the difference from the amount that we got from the federal government, which was 18.3, I think,
Right.
percent, and we're getting 1.7% from the state. And don't get me wrong, we're grateful.
Of course, it's
But
money.
it really will only represent maybe $50 per household, if that much, which really is not helpful.
So what does the demand look like? I mean, when you compare the numbers, I mean, what kind of idea can you give us as to what the demand looks like this year?
Well, I can really only look to my own particular group, and I have approximately 5,000 households that heat with the delivered fuels. And the last time that I checked, about a week and a half ago, 45% of them had less than $50 left. Wow. So then we got the influx of the fuel money, so don't get me wrong, and they'll be able to get another 100 gallons. But with this cold weather, it is going to be gone in 2 to 3 weeks. And what are people going to do then? We're really concerned.
Yeah, and we had Adam Stremko just talking about how we've had our April Fools, April 1st. Can we not? I know. But what do we do, though, if this weather does continue? What is the plan? What kind of help can people get right now?
Well, there were a couple of things. First of all, we were informed that the Citizens Energy Program, the Joe for Oil program, is up and running. So we do encourage people to call. I don't have the number with me. I think it's 1-800-JOE-FOR-OIL, but I'm sure you have that, and if people need it, they can call you to find out. Yep. The other thing, and I really have to put that out there, is I want to encourage people to get in touch with their state representatives or senators to see if, in fact, the state could come up with the $20 million that they had originally been willing to put into the program to help our very vulnerable families.
Now, as far as what you've been able to give people compared to previous years, have you been dealing with some massively cut funds, or how?
Our funds have gone down a bit from last year, but the bigger part of it is the funds have not increased, but the cost of the fuel has increased.
Right.
So therefore, we're able to get people less than we were able to get them previously, and it's been a harder winter. So when you look at the whole picture, and you have to, look at it from different angles, it becomes a really difficult situation for people. Our funds are down a bit, don't get me wrong, they aren't. But the reality is because of the increase in the cost of fuel and the kind of winter people are facing this year is what makes it incredibly difficult.
And what about the number of families needing assistance? Is that at all going down? You know, as we start to see the economy turn around, we'd like to hope that people who are needing assistance are going down.
It is kind of funny that you would ask that because our overall numbers have gone down a bit. However, the number of people who are requesting help with the delivered fuels has gone up. So, when I look at it from that perspective, we are seeing a downturn in the number of people applying, and that's, it's a good thing. Because you want to feel that people are feeling better about their economic situation and they're able to meet their needs. But unfortunately, as I said, the number of people with the delivered fuels, that number has gone up.
So what if there are families who are needing help and it's the middle of February right now? And I know some people were starting to submit their applications in the fall. People get a very much of a head start.
Absolutely.
Is it still possible for somebody to get help?
People can apply until April 30th.
Oh, okay.
And it's not that we don't have funds. We have funds for people. But if people have used up all their funds, we can't give them any more. However, if somebody new came across our threshold tomorrow, the money would be there for them. So people should not be concerned about not applying because they're afraid there is no money. There is money to take care of them. That's a hard thing for people to understand when we say that we're out of benefits. It doesn't mean that we have no money at all. It means that based on your income, you're eligible for a particular amount of money, and if you've used that amount up, we don't have any more for you.
And can you give us an idea as to what somebody, how you are eligible for this? I guess, what are some of those eligibility requirements?
Okay, so we have a very broad eligibility in Massachusetts. We have real concern for all of our people, and we go from the poorest of the poor up to people who are 60% of median income. So if you were a household of one, you could have an income up to about $32,000 and be eligible for a small part of our heating system. In delivered fuels, it would be enough for like 100 gallons, maybe 120 gallons. So we do serve a very broad population.
And from when you go in and submit your application, about how long does it take? Is this something that's fairly immediate? Is it based on their needs? How long does it take to be processed and get approval?
Okay, if you come in and you have all of your information, and that's the key, having all of your information, and you heat with a delivered fuel, or you are concerned about being shut off from a utility, we will get you done within 24 hours.
Okay.
However, we have a backlog of people. Right now, we're still working on applications from the end of October who have submitted applications in the early fall, but they're the people who are not in the most vulnerable situation. They're heating with the utility, and therefore we had kind of fit them in around all of the other people. And so many of them have been waiting a very long time and are very frustrated, and we really feel bad about that. But we're doing the best we can.
So how early can people start planning ahead? Say somebody this year realized that they're in a tough spot and they might know that they will be next winter as well. What is a good time to get back in touch with you? Is it the summer months? I mean,
well, it
when
would
do you
depend
start
upon
planning?
whether you've been on the program before.
Okay.
If you've been on the program before, within the past, let's say 5 years, you could contact us as early as August.
Okay.
And we could get an application out in the mail to you, and we'll get you all working into the process. If you've never been on the program before, we encourage people to start calling us in September, and we start appointments in October to get them set up for what will be next winter.
And is there any, you can only be on so many years or so many seasons or any kind of...
As long as you're income eligible, you can be on for a very long time.
Okay, and one thing that it is always important to keep in mind too, another way to save yourself some money is doing a little weatherizing as well. And I know that this is something that you personally have had a positive experience with as well.
I know, I was just sharing with you the fact that I live in an older home and we had an opportunity to have it weatherized this year, and I couldn't believe the difference in my home interior after weatherization. So we really do encourage people, if they're currently on fuel assistance, to contact Springfield Partners for Community Action in Springfield, because they take care of all of Hampden County. And just informationally, if they're not on fuel assistance, they should contact either, Mass Save. And Mass Save would be able to come in and do an energy audit of their home and give them an idea of whether or not they are adequately weatherized, and if not, what they would need to do in order to reach that point.
Weatherizing could really get you ahead of all this. We were talking about ice dams a couple of segments ago. We could skip through all of this, right?
Well, I think that might be going a little bit far, but it really would be helpful, no question about it. Absolutely.
Any way to save money, too.
You got
Gail Pizzicani, thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
And if you're simply just getting tired of dealing with this winter weather, we'll have some travel deals that you can take advantage of and some tips. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we've been talking about all the recent snowstorms. We've discussed how to safely remove snow and ice from buildings and what you need to insure your property if it gets damaged. We also talked about where to apply for fuel assistance for people who are having trouble making ends meet. Now, if you're getting a little weary with all this talk of snow and cold, we've got some good news for you. There are somebody here who can answer some of your vacation concerns. If you'd like to book a vacation, maybe now's the time to do that. Joining me now, we have Sue Como, travel manager for AAA Pioneer Valley. Thank you so much for joining us
Thanks
today.
for inviting me.
Really appreciate it. I don't know about you, but I know I've been dreaming about warmer temperatures over the last couple of weeks.
I think a lot of us have.
This is kind of the time of year, I think, when people start to look ahead to those warmer months, or maybe just getting away for a little while somewhere a little bit warmer. So I want to know, is now a good time to book a vacation, or is everybody doing it, and are the prices up really high right now? Is there any way to gauge?
Now's a great time to book a vacation. January, February, March typically is our busiest time of the year for bookings. Sometimes they're for last-minute trips. Sometimes they're looking towards the springtime for honeymoons, summertime for Europe, and Alaska cruises.
So is there anywhere in particular where you're starting to see people either travel more or you're starting to see flights get cheaper? I mean, is there any particular vacation spot that you're starting to see grow in popularity, maybe because it's less expensive?
I don't know about less expensive, but Europe is still popular. We've seen an increase in river cruises for the summer. Hawaii is still a popular destination, you know, because their weather is wonderful.
Right.
As far as deals go, airline tickets, there aren't many deals with the airlines any longer because they've cut back so much and they've merged so many times with each other that there just aren't as many deals. What we've found is in the wintertime you might get a great deal on a cruise, but the prices to fly to wherever the destination is that they're leaving from is more than the cost of the cruise itself.
So what are some ways that you can save yourself some money? Is it different times of flights, flexibility of days? Is there any particular day during the week that you might be better off to leave? What are some little things that you can look into that might help you save a few bucks?
The more flexibility that you have when booking flights, the better off you are, whether it be leaving early in the morning. If you're flexible during the daytime, during the dates, that's your best bet at getting the best deal. Different airports. If you live in this area and you can fly out of Hartford, Boston, Providence, that'll give you more options and more flights to choose from. You can mix and match, fly out of Hartford back into Boston. That might give you a better deal. You know, most of the airlines are offering great deals when it comes to combining different airports. So sometimes you can find a deal. Typically Tuesdays and Wednesdays are the best days to travel.
Really?
Yeah, it sounds crazy, but usually those are the best days that you're going to find a least expensive ticket.
That's great. And when is it a good idea to package things all together? Say if you are going to need a rental car, a room, a flight, you know, hotels or what have you. When is it a good time to package them all together? Maybe all inclusive. You have your food and drink in there too. And when is it a good time to pay separately?
In most cases, your best bet is to book them all together, and your travel agent can check those options for you. They can price it both ways. We have a lot of vendors that we use, and they can get bulk airfare prices that aren't available to the consumer online. They have deals and contracts with different hotels, car rental companies, so you're better off booking everything as a package. Typically, you'll save, you know, 20 to 30% doing it that way, so that's the best way to go.
And another thing maybe look into is how much it costs to add extra bags and check bag. Those types of things can start to add up.
They certainly can. That's why Southwest and JetBlue really have the market on that. They've cornered it where they offer free luggage. They're still providing you with snacks and drinks on board and some of those extras that we've become accustomed to. Traveling with the major carriers, it's just a zoo at the airport because everybody's bringing their oversized carry-ons, and if you're in the last group boarding, then I'm sure you've experienced it. There's no room left to put your luggage, and now you haven't paid the $25 fee, but they're still taking your luggage.
Right, exactly. That is a pain when you're the last going on too, and there's can everyone just squeeze them all down? Now you also mentioned having a travel agent go through a few things. When is it best to have a travel agent, and when is it best to go on and do it yourself? I guess, what are the pros and cons to have it? And of course, you work for a travel agency, so we need to.
Well, honestly, it's always best to use a travel agent because you have somebody that you can go back to if there's a problem or an issue.
Okay.
If you're sitting in front of the computer ready to book that $6,000 trip, do you really want to hit enter on the keyboard knowing that you maybe have a website or an 800 number to call, or do you want to know that, you know, if I have an issue and I can go back in 2 weeks, then Sue's sitting at her desk and I know where she works and I know that I can go back to her for a problem. It's always great to educate yourself online, get as much information as possible, but I highly recommend using a travel professional when you're ready to press that button on the keyboard and make the sale, because if something does go wrong, there are certain things that we can do that the consumers aren't able to online.
And how about travel insurance? When should you have it? Who's the best candidate for it? Is it for everyone?
Always buy travel insurance.
What
We
does that
had an
cover?
experience a couple of years ago with a tornado. The customers didn't purchase the travel insurance, and it's not just cancellation insurance, it's trip interruption insurance as well. They were stuck in Mexico for an extra 3 weeks and had to pay out of pocket for those expenses because they didn't purchase the insurance. If you have children, always buy insurance. If you have elderly parents or relatives that you're concerned about, travel insurance encompasses so many different arms and legs that, you know, there's something for everyone, and it can be tailored to meet your needs. But you definitely want to make sure you're covered and you're protecting your investment. If you're paying, you know, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 and upwards $1,000 for your vacation, you want to be sure that you're going to get that money back if something happened.
So is there a way that you can actually go in and see exactly what travel insurance, and are there different companies that offer the travel insurance? How exactly does that work?
Typically, most of the vendors that we use have their own travel insurance, but AAA also offers their own travel insurance program, and it's more comprehensive typically than the vendor's insurance, and it can be tailored to meet your needs. So yes, no matter where you go or which agency you use, you can always get travel insurance through them. And if you've already booked your vacation, you can still come to AAA, and we'll still be able to provide you with insurance to cover your trip.
And something else you mentioned are canceled flights. We've had so many snowstorms. It's what this whole program has been about. Have you experienced a number of canceled flights? What do you do? How do you plan for that? What's the deal?
There's another reason why you want to use a travel professional. If you're booking flights online, then you're at the mercy of the airline and rebooking directly with them or online. If you have a travel professional, they're going to go through the whole process for you. They can do it seamlessly. We have a system that's, you know, directly linked to the airlines where we can go in and adjust your flights, rebook them for you, and make any corrections needed. But if you're traveling, particularly if you're traveling on a cruise, in the wintertime, you want to make sure that you're going the day before, just to give yourself plenty of time to get down there so you can enjoy your vacation, no stress, no worries.
And do different airlines handle that differently, the canceled flights? Is that a question to ask, or see their own policy?
They all handle it pretty much the same, but it's chaos. I know that with the storm that we had this week, U.S. Air's message on their phone was, "I'm sorry, we are overloaded with call volume. Please call back later," and then they disconnect you.
Oh, no.
So it's very difficult to get through, particularly if you're the consumer trying to get through on the phone, the number that they provided to you.
Very good. Sue Como, AAA Pioneer Valley, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. Some great advice you had.
Thanks again for inviting
As
me.
we're all dreaming of those warm vacations
I
right
know.
now. Thank you, and we'll have the last word for you after the break. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we've been talking about the recent snowstorms and cold temperatures that have been affecting us all nationwide. We've discussed how to safely remove snow and ice on your buildings and your homes and roofs, and how to insure your property if you do suffer any storm damage. We've talked about how to get fuel assistance, and if you are certainly tired of the winter weather, we talked about booking a vacation, when the best time to book is, some questions you can ask, and when you should be taking off. That is our program for today. We want to thank all of our guests for joining us. We want to thank you at home for watching, and if you've missed any of it, you can watch it in full on our website at wwlp.com. From all of us here at 22 News, we wish you a wonderful Sunday. We'll see you next week.